Okay, I think we can start. Okay. Hope my screen is visible. I uploaded this material in the Moodle actually. So you can refer it later on. Oops in Python. You can find it in this folder session materials. Anyone practiced yesterday's questions in the Moodle? Many doubts you have? So I've added 2 more programs today. 3 more programs I've added. We'll just quickly explain that. Then we'll go to the next topic. Okay. Okay, if you can see 7th question, there is a question based on polymorphism and inheritance. Okay. So here we are understanding how to do this implementation of polymorphism concept in real time. Excuse me. So create a parent class called as vehicle, which has 2 fields. It has name and color as the 2 variables inside that. And there is a child class called as car, and it inherits properties of name and color from the parent class. So what does it mean is it initializes instances using parent class. Okay. So I've given the explanation. That means the child class car doesn't need to create a function or the constructor to initialize this name and color. So it will borrow that function from the parent class vehicle. Then there is a vehicle class, which has 2 methods, maximum speed and gears, where vehicle maximum speed is 150, gear, which indicates number of gears for vehicle. So here by default number of gears for vehicle is given as 6. Now what you need to do, child class car you need to create, which will implement both the above methods. So what do you mean by that? It implements both the above method means it has to exactly replicate these 2 functions without any change, right? Name and function parameters and name, everything should be same. And it has to change vehicle class maximum speed is 250 and number of gears is 7. So what is the meaning here? Parent class's default value for speed is 150 and default value for gear is 6. Now child class has to implement these 2 functions in its own method and rechange this 150 to 250 in its class and number of gears to 7 in its class. You have to complete the program by reading the name of the vehicle and its details and car name and its details from the user. So you have to read parent class details in the first and print that details. Next line, you have to read child class details and print it. So if you observe the output, so I'm entering here input as bus and the color is orange on the first line. In the second line, I'm entering BMW and black, right? So here what you need to get the output. The output for the first one should be like this, vehicle details. So it is a general vehicle. I'm printing as it is whatever I'm entering. So bus and orange, and maximum speed is 150. And number of gear is vehicle bus, whatever the name I'm entering. It has 6 gears. Now in the next line, I'm entering car name and the car color. Now here also you are printing vehicle details, but these details are changed. Car maximum speed is 250, and whatever the name I have given BMW, that has 7 gears. So based on whatever the user enters on the screen. For example, I'll enter something like this. For example, AP or something like orange is the bus name. Color is white. So I have to get this detail. Then I'll enter car details. For example, Maruti. So whatever the name you are entering, here you are entering the child class details, and here you are entering the parent class details. For the parent class details, this value is fixed, and for the child class detail, this value is fixed. So what is common here is the method name, and the method names are common. Here the speed and the gear name, both the method names is common, but the output is different. Here we are getting one output, here we are getting another output. So just quickly show you, you can try it later on. So what I have done here. So here we have a class vehicle. What is this one? It is a default constructor, right? The constructor for the vehicle class, and it is accepting 2 parameters. That means it is a parameterized constructor. And as I told you, it has one more thing that you need to observe here. There is a show method, right? I should have mentioned here. For example, I'll update the question here. Child class car has to display the entered data using parent class function or parent class method show. Okay, here I'll write show method which brings the entered details. Okay, now you can observe child class car has to display the entered data using parent class method show. That means again, it is inheriting the properties of the parent class method. So here show is native to the parent class, but which is being accessed by the child class. And what is the difference with these two functions? With the help of show, what we are understanding the inheritance. With the help of these two functions, we are understanding polymorphism. So yesterday I told you what is polymorphism. Polymorphism is using the same name but the different implementation. So we are implementing differently these two functions, but we are using this as it is from the parent class. We are not changing that. So when you just use the parent class function as it is without changing anything from the parent class method, that is called as inheritance. Whereas when you change the implementation of the parent class function and use it in your own class, that is called as polymorphism. Okay. So here we have parent class constructor, parent class method show. Here through this, we are printing the vehicle details, and the parent class has maximum speed function and gears function. So here by default, I want you guys to print as 150, and whatever the vehicle name that you enter on the screen, that vehicle has 6 gears. That is the default message. Now this child class car is implementing inheriting properties of parent class, and it is using the same name as it is in the parent class, correct? You can see here also same name, here also same name, gears also same. But what is the change? The value is changed, right? Here the value is changed to 250, and here it is 7. But one thing you can observe at this line, you can see the car object. We are creating the car object, right? Car object is calling the show function, but is it defined inside the car function, car class? Nowhere it is defined, right? So when we are writing this line, what is happening? This particular sentence is calling the parent class function, that is this one. So what you are understanding here, This is inheritance, correct? We are inheriting the properties of the parent class. We are directly accessing that as it is. But when we are calling this car.maxSpeed, car.gears, we are not calling the parent class function. We are calling the child class function because they are redefined. Okay, they are redefined. That's why it is called as polymorphism. This one is polymorphism. And this one is telling you about inheritance. Okay. So what you need to do in this code is first read from the input name and color from the user, create a vehicle class, and which type of constructor we are using, parameterized constructor, initializing those two values, whichever the user is entering on the screen. Then we are displaying the details, maximum speed and gears, number of gears. On the next line again, after displaying the parent class details, we are reading one more set of values for the child class, right? Now here at this point, we are creating child class constructor. Can you guys tell me at this point, what is happening? Anyone? Which function is getting called at this point? Do we have constructor in the child class? Do we have any constructor here? There is no constructor, right? So how the child class is trying to store this name and color? Anyone? What happens at this point? Anyone? So what is happening at this point? Okay, please be interactive so that you can clarify your doubts. So here, as soon as I create child class object, child class constructor has to be called, but there is no child class constructor, right? So which particular constructor is calling? Since this child class is inheriting the properties of parent class called as vehicle, directly it will call this particular constructor, which is there in the vehicle class. So this is called as again inheritance. This is also inheritance. So two types of inheritance you are understanding while initializing the values, while displaying the values. Whereas polymorphism, we are understanding with this one and this one. Okay. So you can execute this code later on. Then I have given one more question. This is a bit interesting question which you can understand and do it. Okay. So you have to create a class called as shopping, which has two instances. Instances means you can say variables. And the instances are empty list basket. List name is basket. And the name of the buyer. So you need to override this particular program is helping you to understand method overriding, which we discussed in the yesterday's class, method overriding. So this particular class called a shopping has a basket and buyer as the two values. You need to override the inbuilt method. See here, what you need to do? Override the inbuilt method length. So in the yesterday's session, I told you what is method overriding. You will change the behavior of the particular operator or operand, right? Okay. For example, here is this example I showed you yesterday. This is also an example of polymorphism or method overriding, correct? So the same function is behaving differently based on the input data. So here I want you guys to override the inbuilt method len function to return the total number of items in the basket. Generally, what does length will do? Suppose there are three values in the list, it will display, it will return 3 as the output. Suppose if there are, suppose if this is a string, grit is a string. If I call length function to calculate how many characters are there in this string, it will return 5 as the output, correct? This is a default behavior of the inbuilt function length. But I want to change the default behavior. That is why it is called as override. Override means you are changing the default behavior of the function. So here I want to change the default behavior to return the total number of items in the basket multiplied by 2. So generally, suppose in the list there are 3 items, means I don't want to display as 3. I want to display as 3 into 2, 6. In the output, I want to get the answer as 6. So what does it tell you? We are changing how the length function works. So as a user, we are modifying the operational capability of length function. Length function will calculate number of items, but we are changing that number of items multiplied by 2. That is called as override. So you need to create another method read, which is used to enter the name of the buyer and item to be stored in the basket. Print buyer name, basket content, and number of items each on the new line. So this is the order you need to print. So for example, here I have given the test case. You are entering the name of the buyer. Then items you are entering one by one. So I'm entering 3 items, right? Bread, milk, and chocolate. These are 3 items I'm entering. And in the output, you can see I want to display buyer name, basket content. What is the basket content? As a list, I want to print, and total number of items in the basket. So as you see, total number of items are how many? 3 only. But the output we are getting is 6, because I have given in the question. Whatever the length of the list is, you need to multiply by 2. That means you are changing the behavior of the length function. The number of items we are getting is 6. This you can do using normal approach. Suppose you need not use class for this. If somebody don't know how to do it using class, what they will do is they will calculate length into 2 and print the output. That also you can do, but you are not learning the concept if you do like that. So you need to understand the concept. For example, so what is the question? You need to have a shopping class which has a constructor to initialize 2 items, 2 elements. One is the basket, one is the buyer. See, are we initializing here? What is the question says? You need to create another method read, which is used to enter the name of the buyer and items to be stored in the basket. So in this case, the constructor is not initializing the element. Who is initializing the element? This read function is initializing. Then you can ask, what is the job of the constructor here? In this case, the job of the constructor in this case is to just create the name of the items in the class. It is like creating int a. So we just know that there is a variable called as a. Initialization can be done by somebody else. Suppose some function is taking inside that function, I'm initializing a equal to 10 or whatever the number I want to. So in this case, read function is initializing these items, but the constructor is only just creating the elements, the name of the elements. So when we write this line, what does this mean? It is called as default constructor, right? Because it is not accepting any parameter. So it is just creating the object for the shopping class. The constructor is getting called and these 2 items are initialized. Object name is shopping. Now at this point, this particular line, we are doing the initialization. So this is just a creation of the object and initializing the variables in basket and buyer. Here we are actually reading the data into this. So when I write this statement, which function is getting called? This read function is getting called. Inside the read function, I want you to read the data. So we are reading the data for the buyer, right? Self.buyer and items equal to input. So I'm reading that whatever the items user is entering in the another list. Then that particular elements I'm splitting based on the space and storing in self.basket. These items has to go inside the basket, right? So self.basket. Now, this particular 2 lines, you know that it is just displaying the buyer name and the content in the basket. So we are accessing that using the object. But what is this line? Generally, you know, whenever you call this length function, it will just return the number of items. But in this case, what it is returning us? It is returning us 6 because we modified the behavior of the length function. So what is happening here? Whenever I'm calling this length, this particular function is getting called. This is called as, yesterday I used one word. What is that? Magic method, right? Magic method. So what is magic method? I told you. So magic method is used to redefine the existing functionality of operators or inbuilt functions. So whenever length function is called here we are modifying the inbuilt functionality of the length. And what we are modifying? We are counting the number of elements in the basket. Then we are returning that count into 2. So that same length function is updated like this. So every time you call length function in this code, it will always return number of items multiplied by 2. So that is the change. Okay, this particular concept tells you how to override the inbuilt method. Correct? So this is the question, right? Overriding the inbuilt method. So we are overriding. Override means what? Basically, already something is there. You are modifying that and making that particular function to behave differently. So these two concepts you can practice in similar way. Here we are doing overloading, the same code with a different type of output. I have to modify the test case. I will do it later. But you can understand the concept here. So I'm reading two values, suppose 3 and 5. So we are overriding which particular method? You can see the greater than operator. GT is the inbuilt magic method, GT, which is called as a greater than. So whenever you are using this greater than symbol, this function is getting called, correct? This function is getting called. It is comparing 3 and 5, for example. In this case, 3 is not greater than 5. So it will return false. Then we are going to the else part and we are printing the variable 2 is greater than variable 1. But generally, what is the return value of this particular thing? This will return 1 or 0, right? 1 or 0 based on which value is greater than the other value. But we're modifying that inbuilt behavior again. So whenever I'm using the greater than symbol, right? So this function is getting called and it is comparing whatever the object I'm getting, whatever the object I'm calling. Suppose here variable 1 and variable 2. So by default, what is happening here is we are initializing the object and two objects we are creating, and each object we are comparing. Self.a is compared with b.a, right? So when we are using this particular is object 1 has 3 as the value. Here we are having 5 as the value. They are both getting compared and it will return true or false. But with the help of this GT inbuilt function, we are changing the behavior of greater than symbol. So I wanted you to explore this kind of functions and modify it based on your requirement, however you want it to be seen on the output. Okay. Okay. So we covered up to operator overloading, I think, in the last class, correct? Okay, there is one more code that I added, but I didn't enable it because of some server issue here. But I will explain here only. So how this code is very big actually. I wanted you guys to try this one, but because of the mismatch in the server and the Moodle output, I didn't enable it because of the version problem. So this is a very good example to understand how this OOPS concept will be useful in real time. Okay. See, for example, I'll explain the test case so you can understand what is this code is. Here the user has to enter the course name here, course name on the first line, followed by the student roll numbers. So how many roll numbers I've entered? 3 roll numbers. And after that, I'm pressing Q. Q means basically I'm quitting. Maximum number of students can be stored is 5, but I am storing only 3 students. And after that, I'm quitting, entering the data. After that, what I'm displaying the course name and what is the maximum capacity of the course. So what I said is 5. So this will be always 5 only. So you should display 5 as the output. Then I'm printing student IDs. So student IDs, if you see, can anyone tell me what is the difference here in this input and in this output? What is the difference? I've entered these details, but what is the output I'm getting? So something is deleted, right? What is deleted? Please observe that put and then somebody can tell me the answer. Unique IDs only, 3 inputs, but only 2 outputs. Okay. So as you can see in this application, what we want to do, if the user enters duplicated roll numbers, they should not be enrolled. That means they should be allowed to enter the course only once. So 10 and 10 roll number are repeated. So we are storing that as only once and deleting the other one. Then I want to display the messages. Course is not yet full. Why this message? Can anyone tell me? Why I'm displaying like this? Course is not yet full. Why I'm displaying like that? Because what is the capacity of the course? 5, right? So how many students are there in the class as of now? Only 2 students. So that means still 3 more positions are pending or vacant. So until all the 5 allocations are done, we will always get this messages course is not yet full, or else you will get course is full. Yeah. Yes. Out of 5, only 2 students. Yes. So this is the complete logic. The question might look very big question, but this much clarity is always needed when you are working with the OOPS programs, because everything has to be mentioned clearly. So if you read these kind of questions, if you see these kind of questions, you need not to panic. You can go through step by step and understand what is the requirement. But the difference here is what I am doing. A dictionary field is used to store the name of the course. Okay. I'm not using dictionary field. Actually for course details, I'm using the dictionary not for the name. Okay, here and a list called student ID. Student ID. For student ID, what I am using? A list called student ID representing the student in the course by their ID numbers. Constructor is already given, which will help you to initialize the data. Okay, so constructor part will be already given. That means in the question only I would have been given the constructor part. Okay, now a method called isFull need to be implemented that takes no arguments and return true or false based on whether or not the course is full. Okay, it takes no arguments, but it will return true or false based on whether the course is not full. That is, if the number of students in the course is equal to or above the capacity. And add student method should be created to add, which takes the student ID number and adds the student to the course. If the student is already in the course, they must not be added. And if the course is full, the student must not be added to the course, and course is full error message should be displayed. Else print course is not at full message in the end after printing the course data. Right? This is a sample test case. So this question, the problem I show you. So some programs cannot be run in this model because of the version mismatch. Yeah. So this program, I wanted you guys to do it, but I am only explaining. So let me add some roll numbers. So suppose I'll add 2354 again. Then I'm quitting. So 2354 is not repeated twice, and course is not at full. But if you see the same input and output in the after evaluating, so there is a mismatch here. So what is happening here is in the server the course name is coming empty, but in the expected output I'm getting in while you execute locally, you're getting the correct output, but when you are submitting it to the server, course name is not displayed. You can observe where it is coming. It is coming inside the student ID, the course name. But here in locally, there is no problem. There is no problem here. So this part is the only problem why I didn't add the question in the model. But it's a very good question to learn how to implement these kind of programs. So I need to update the Python compiler in the server, which I will do it later on. Right now, we can't update it because all your data will be removed, and we are doing a lot of training activities for other batches. But I'm giving you this explanation so that you can try it on your own in any online compiler. The only problem here is it will run properly locally, but when you are submitting it to the server, because of the version mismatch, the output is not matching. Okay. So obviously we are using it as a through the class only. Constructor is there, name is initialized. Can you see what is this one? Course data. Is it a dictionary or not? So the dictionary contains the capacity and student IDs. Within the dictionary, we are having the list and the normal variable. So that's what the requirement. And maybe because of the dictionary also, we are getting the output like this. Yeah. So one more reason for this is, I think I explained in one of the classes in previous sessions, dictionary in modal is unordered, correct? Unordered. Whereas from the version 3.7 onwards, Python version 3.7 onwards, dictionaries are ordered. So this code is working for the ordered data, whereas our server is having 3.6 version, which is unordered. So every time you run, the output won't match because it is a random order. It will display whatever it randomly it will display the elements. So there is no particular order. So that is also might be one of the reason. Okay. Then as per the condition, capacity is 5 always. It is fixed. So you need to initialize as it is. Then student ID is empty. Empty in the beginning because right now I have not entered any student data. So it has to be empty. Then we are reading the input from the user, then calling the course constructor using the course name, right? That means this particular constructor is getting called. Then we are using infinite loop here. Can you see what is this things I've added extra? So that is the next topic. It is also called as exception handling. Exception handling in Python. Okay. So this we need to add. I'll tell you why I've added it later on. Basically, we are reading the data from the user, right? We are entering some data, right? The student ID, something like this. I'm pressing enter button and next student data is read. So I have to strip the new line while reading. Then if the student ID, suppose if I enter Q somewhere, then I have to stop the loop. Else I have to call the add student function. So which function I'm getting called? This particular function I'm calling add student. In this function, what we are doing, course.add student, whatever the ID I've entered that I am calling. Here, what I am doing in this function, if student ID, whatever I am sending from this function, not in the course data of this list. So you see the logic, whatever the ID I've sent to the function, if it is not in the course data of, see this structure, course data is a dictionary. this student ID is a list, correct? So in that, if it is not there, and this is one condition, and one more condition also has to be true. What is that? And if the course is not yet full, right? Suppose if the course is full, what we are trying, what we are returning, if the course is full, we are calculating the length of the course based on the, we are calculating the number of students based on the length function, self dot course of data student ID. So this will determine how many students are there in the list. Suppose 3 are there, and what is the condition in the capacity? 5. So this will return false, right? So 3 is not greater than 5, and it will return false 0. So in this case, it will be not matching. So if both the conditions are matched, then only we'll add that, append that student data into the list. So we are doing separate functionality for each requirement, right? So this is checking the full condition. This is adding the student. This part is initializing the variables. So everything is done separately. That's why we are achieving abstraction here. Then after adding, again, if the user wants to read, one more student data we will read. We will check whether user has pressed Q or not. If user has not pressed Q, we will add the student detail until as long as this condition is true. Okay. So now why this try and except I have added, you need to know. So because this is an infinite loop, right? So compiler don't know when this loop will end. So we have to put this particular block of code into the try and except. So this is a structure of exception handling. So you need to do something like this: try, do whatever you want here, write whatever code you want here. If there is any error in this particular code, that should be accepted, and it should be accepted as whatever the error you are trying to understand. So if there is any error in this particular code, that will be sent to the accept error, and we will treat it as an end of the file error. Okay. So I will explain some other programs based on this, but generally, when you don't know what is the outcome of the program, it is always better to put that code in the try block and write the corresponding except block, which will read the error message and store it without displaying error message on the screen. Okay. So this is one of the application of the OOPS concept. You can say these kind of questions you need to know, right? Practical oriented applications. So they will develop the in real time applications like this only. Okay. So this question you can try it in Moodle. It won't work, but you can try it in any online compiler. Okay. So I was talking about try and except, right? So what is the topic name? Exception handling. This is also very important topic when it comes to Java. Please understand. So if anyone has interest in Java, this is the most important topic, one of the most important topics, exception handling. Okay. So here, what we are trying to do, we're trying to print some value X, right? Do we have any value associated with this X? It is not yet defined, right? Generally, what you do, you will assign some value to the X, then you will print X. So you'll get on the screen the output of that particular 10. Suppose if you don't initialize, and if you're directly writing, we'll delete this. Suppose if I directly write X, okay, it's already initialized. Internally, it is stored in the memory. So let me print some other variable B. Okay. So when I'm trying to print B directly without initializing it, what is the error we are getting? Name error. Name B is not defined. So this particular error message is given by the compiler only inbuilt. Now the same thing when we are trying to do here, inside the try block, I'm trying to print X value. So there is no X value. So instead of displaying error message like this, which is very confusing or not user friendly to read, right? So users will panic when they see these kind of errors. So instead of showing this kind of errors, big errors, we are handling these errors. So that is called as exception handling. So how we are handling whenever we are trying to do this kind of operation, if at all there is an error, we are calling except block. And here we have defined it as name error. Name error. That means we should know when we write some code inside the try block, we should know as a developer what kind of errors might occur in that particular block of code. In this block of code, what kind of errors might come. That as a developer, we should know. Once we know those kind of errors might occur or the user might enter some invalid data, so we should write corresponding information in the except block. So here we know that whenever the variable is not defined, we are trying to print that value of the variable, it might generate the name error. So here we are getting the name error, right? So what we are saying here, except the name error, okay? Except the name error, colon. Inside the except block, instead of displaying this kind of error message, what we are displaying, variable x is not defined. Here also it is a simple error, so both of them look similar. Or I can customize this error message. For example, it is important to declare and assign value to x before printing it. Okay. So now see, I'm trying to print B. I'm not getting this name error in this block. Here I'm getting name error, but in this block, I'm not getting name error because this is handled differently by the user, by the developer. Okay. So whenever we get name error, instead of displaying this kind of message, this traceback and this cell number, all these things, only one information is printed on the screen. So what is that information? Whatever we have customized that. So it is important to declare and assign value to X or B before printing it. So now user will have a better clarity whenever the error comes. So the user will not panic. He knows what is his role, what data he has to enter. Correct. So this is called as exception handling. As a developers, we should preliminarily assume or imagine what kind of errors might occur in the project, and we have to handle them in a way that user can understand instead of displaying error message like this, because not everyone is a coder, right? Ultimately our project is used by the end user. The user don't know what is the project, what is the background code and all those things. He will only worry about the outcome. So the outcome should be having a clarity. So that clarity can be only be given based on the exception handling. Right? This is the most important part, because many times when you get errors, students will panic and they won't execute, or they will say a lot of errors are coming. We will see some other code or some other example. So those errors, instead of displaying those errors, if I exactly display what is the wrong or where is the code that went wrong, it gives a better readability for the user, right? So that is called as exception handling. So it is important to declare and assign the value before printing it. Suppose some other error is there. Let me try to print. Now I'll assign B to 0 or B to 10 I will assign. Can anyone tell me why I'm getting this error in this case? Something else went wrong. Why it is not displaying this one and why it is going here? Or we will try to divide here only. Divide by 0 error. So now you can see when I'm doing without exception handling, I'm getting 0 division error, division by 0. Correct? So instead of displaying like this, here also I can customize. You cannot divide a number by 0. Correct? So this is the advantage of exception handling. We can write multiple except blocks. For example, just now you saw something like this. So now I got indentation error, right? So I'll copy this error. I'll write one more except block, except indentation error, and I'll print. Please check whether the code is properly indented or not. This has to actually generate error. Yeah. Mhm. So this kind of things you can customize basically. This has to work. Okay, this has to be last. See, always it is like if else statement, right? You know, if is the first statement, then else if, then multiple else if, finally you will write else now. Similarly, you can write as many except blocks as you want. Final should be just except. That means if none of the previous errors are handled, the default error message will be displayed. So you can't put that in the beginning. So always this except block should be in the end. I think we cannot handle the indentation errors. So maybe this is not allowed. Okay, I'll check it. If you want, you can just try it and let me know. Is there any way to handle indentation errors also? Unindented does not match any outer indentation level. So instead of displaying like this, I want to customize like this, but it is not working actually. Maybe this indentation error is not allowed to handle by the compiler because that is a basic rule now. Maybe we need to use the exception handling only during the logical problems, right? So this is a syntactical error, right? So by default, syntax errors will be displayed by the compiler only. So I think you can't change the inbuilt functionality. And this is one way. And there is something called as rise keyword. I want you guys to understand a rise keyword. RAISE. This is the inbuilt one. So as you see what we are doing, the X is initialized to string. What we are checking in this line is we are checking if the variable X is not of integer type. Generally, I want integer value, but by mistake, I declared the string value, assume like that. So we are checking whether the X is integer or not. So if the type of this variable is not integer, I want to raise customized error message. Okay, I want to raise customized error message. So that is called as a rise keyword. And the type error. I can customize the type error like this. Generally, you know type errors, right? X equal to 10, or you'll say X equal to string, X equal to int of X. Okay, so we will get this kind of value errors, right? So instead of displaying the error message like this, we will raise our own errors. So our own errors we can customize here also. We'll raise the type error and we'll say only integers are allowed. You can customize this message. This is not inbuilt. Or you can say please enter integer value for X. Okay. So you see whatever the customized error message that we are having, that only is getting updated. So we are modifying the inbuilt message of type error. So generally type error has its own message, which we are customizing. Let me see, can we display the inbuilt message? So there is no inbuilt message. We have to customize it. Integer should be enter. Okay. So this is the type error, and we can customize our own error messages using rise keyword based on our requirement. So a lot of other codes I will be handling in the model in the coming training sessions in future, because these are some little bit advanced topics. So we'll cover these topics in the advanced Python sessions. So you can just have an idea what is the exception handling, just clarity you can have when we need to use them. This one you can try it later on, whether it is possible to handle indentation errors. Okay. So, there is one more important concept, iterator and generators. So iterators, you already know. What do you mean by iterator? Anything that can be accessed the values from that particular iterator using loop one by one, correct? That is called as iterator. So you can see for loop accessing the list values using for loop is called as iteration, because list supports iteration, correct? So some data types won't support the iteration. So we are understanding which type of data can be iterated, which cannot be iterated. For example, here, this is a list, right? And if you remember the difference between list, set, dictionary, and tuple, we understood some data structures cannot be iterated, right? Directly, you need to use a specific function for that. For example, dictionary, to access dictionary element, you are using a specific inbuilt function. So you can't access them directly using the loop, right? So here list is iterable. So just an understanding you can get here. We are using the inbuilt function called as iter, and we are passing the list name. Okay. And that whatever the list we are passing to the my iter, and we are trying to print that iter my iter value, but we are not getting any output. We are getting the object name. So if you want to get the list values using the iterators, you need to use the inbuilt function called as next. Okay. So what is the advantage here is every time you're writing the same thing, correct? So it is accessing each value of the list one by one every time you write this next function. So first time I wrote next, my iteration, I got this I as the output, second this love as the output, then Python. So every time you're calling that iterator using next, it is displaying the output one by one. So that's what is exactly done by the for loop also. For loop also access the list elements using iterator, which you can't see on the screen. It is a background process. So using iterator, I am trying to show you one more example of exception handling here. If you see, there is a list. Generally, this is important. Why I'll tell you. Without this try and catch block, what will happen? I'll show you first. Assume that this try and catch block is not there. Okay. So as you can see, we are getting some error message, stop iteration. But the same thing with the try and catch block. If you observe both the codes, here we are getting the error message, but here we are not getting the error message. This is the importance of try and catch block, try and except block. Generally, they use catch in the Java. So sometimes I'll be using this keyword by mistake. So in Python, we are using except a keyword. In Java, we use catch, try and catch. Okay. So if you observe the difference between both the codes, what we are doing here, we are trying to print the number of elements in the list one by one using the next function until there are elements. So infinite loop until there are elements. So once the elements are over, it is printing some error message called as stop iteration. Basically, it is not able to stop the iteration. It is keep on trying to print the value, but there are no values after 4. So we are getting this stop iteration error. So we might have to handle this particular error message. To do that, we are using try and except concept here. So before printing, I'm putting this code inside the try block, and instead of printing this error message on the screen, I am accepting that error message. Accept stop iteration. So what does this mean? Until there are elements in the list, keep on printing it. Once the elements are over, accept the stop iteration and break the loop. Okay. That is why here we are getting the output 1, 2, 3, 4 properly. Here also we are getting the output, but along with that, we are getting this error message. So these kind of things are very confusing when you do real-time application. So you need to know these concepts, how to handle the errors based on the requirement. Okay. So this is one of the advantage of exception handling when we are accessing the elements of the iteration. Okay. So here also I'm using that the concept of rise keyword I told you now. So if you see here, I'm sending some number 3 to the class. We are using the class concept here, creating the object number, sending 3 to that. So what does it mean? We are initializing the max value as 3 for this particular class, and we are calling I equal to iterator numbers. Okay, we are calling iterator numbers. So what is happening here is when I'm calling this iter function, this inbuilt function is getting called. This is also magic method. Iter is a magic method. So whenever iter function is used, by default, this magic method is called. Then this number is sent to this, and we are initializing that number to 0 basically. Then when we are calling next of I, again for this next, this is a magic method, inbuilt method. So every time I use next method, this method is getting called. So initially n value is 0. We are comparing n with the max. So initial value of n is 0. 0 is compared with 3. Condition is true. We will come and calculate the result. So result is n mod 2, where basically mod of 2 we are calculating. So 0 mod 2 is 0. I'll get 0 on the output. Correct. Then we are incrementing n value. Okay. So for the very first time when I call this print method, 0 is printed on the output. Then again, I'm writing next of I as it is. The same function is getting called with the updated value of n. Now 1 is not less than 3. Condition is true. Will come inside. Then we are taking mod of 1 mod 2, where the output is 1. Correct. Then simultaneously, I'm calling the 2 more times next function. So 2 mod 2 will get 0. 3 mod 3. 3 mod 2 will get the output as 1. Okay. Now if you see, there is something called as else block. Suppose if n value is not less than 3, suppose assume n value reaches 4 and the max value is 3. So obviously we are crossing the limit of the iteration. Maximum iteration is 3. Now we reached 4. This has to be handled. Correct. Suppose if I delete this particular code, since it is already handled, it is not displaying any error message. So generally what we get whenever we cross the limit of the iteration, we'll get the error message like this, right? So stop iteration. So here also, what we did, we have to actually raise the stop iteration. So actually we should get the error message. I think it's not working in this compiler. So what I want to display on the output is whenever the n value reaches more than 3, suppose here max value is 3, n value is 4, I want to display the rise stop iteration, whatever the message that we were getting here. This kind of error I want to display. Okay. So I'll give the correct output for this in the updated notes. Similarly, there is an inbuilt module called as iter tools. Please note down, this is also a very powerful module. Please practice some problems based on iter tools. So I won't explain this one. You can only understand by the output what it is doing. The iter tools is iterating over the inbuilt supply of the value. It is counting first 10 numbers with the difference of 5. Correct? 10 numbers of the difference of 5 starting from 10, 10, 15, and we are breaking the loop once we reach 50. So it is a very powerful inbuilt method. A lot of such methods are there. In the next one also, if you see this code, what we are doing using iterator tools module, the inbuilt function is cycle, and I am supplying the value as 123, 123. Okay, and once the temp value reaches 7, if temp is greater than 7, break, right? Else print that value. Okay, initially temp value is 0, so 0 is not greater than 7, so we'll break it. Then we'll break the loop, and then we'll increment the temp value. So basically what we are trying to do, we're trying to print up to 8 values in a repeated cycle. So you can see 1 2 3 1 2 3 and again 1 2 3. Once we reach 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 basically. So once it reaches greater than 7, we'll print that 8th value and stop it. Correct? So this is also inbuilt function called as cycle. So repeated values of cycles we can print. And then there is something called as a repeat function also. Iterator tools dot repeat 25 comma 4. So what does it tells us? Repeat 25 4 times. Okay. So whatever I'm listing, these are not the only function. There are like thousands of functions inside iterator tools, which I can't explain in one class. So you have to explore these functions. So there is a repeat function which repeats this given value. Then there is something called as permutation. This library itself has another sub library called as permutations. So if you observe the output, please observe the output and see what is happening. So we are trying to find out permutations of, right, permutations and combination. Two types of permutation for the given list actually. So what is the first one? This is the first permutation, and another permutation is Python 3. For example, if I change this value, let me have one more. Okay. So I have supplied 3 possible values to the permutation, and I'm telling give me the permutations of 3 values. So this is the first value, this is the second value, third, 4, 5, 6. So 6 possibilities are there, right? So that is the powerful functions these are. Then permutations of string I am doing. So this particular string can be arranged in how many different ways? So 2 possibilities. Suppose if the same thing, if I type something like GRIET, you can see how many combinations we will get. So just by using one function name, we can do all this without writing the big logics. So these are used based on the requirement actually. And we can also restrict number of output I want. So in the previous case, I was getting a lot of permutation values, right? So that also we can restrict. So what we are telling is give me from 0 to 4 range combination of two values. Suppose if I change this to 3, You can see from 0 to maximum is 4, but it is giving me the combination of 0, 1, 2 only, from the range of 0 to 2 only. So if I make it as 4, I'll get combinations of 0, 1, 2, 3. How many such combinations you can get that it will display. So all these things you can do it from iter_tools function. So it has its own functions for everything. Actually, it has product functions. See, so what it is doing, it is trying to find the product of these elements, repeat 2 times basically. So 2 cross 2, 2 cross 4, 4 cross 2, and 4 cross 4. These are the different type of possibilities. Then here CD multiplied with 4, 5 in a different possible way. C into 4, C into 5, D into 4, and D into 5. So this is also one of the inbuilt function. Whatever maximum I can important ones I'm listing here, but you can explore other functions also. So this is also accumulate function is there, right? There is an accumulate function. So it prints successive summation of the elements, right? What is successive summation? You can see the output here. 1 plus 4 is 5, right? 5 plus 5 is 10, 10 plus 7 is 17, then 17 plus 9 is 26, 26 plus 11 is 37. So you need not to write while loop logic, array logic for this. You just need to know the library files. So accumulate is one such library. So here it is by default, it is doing what? Successive sum. That also you can customize. We can tell that for the accumulate function, supply the operator multiplication. So in this case, what it is doing, the same accumulate function is doing the multiplication of the elements in the list. But if you see the library files, there are 2 library files, iter_tools and operator. Both library files are used here. Okay. So similar to the iter_tools, we have a concept of generators. Okay. They will ask the difference between iterators and generators. You should know this also. So if you see, the definition is a little bit confusing. So what is generator? Generators are used to create iterators. Okay. So this is the confusing statement, right? So we are talking about difference between iterators and generators, but the definition says generators are used to create iterators. But how you create iterators, it is not exactly same as the iterators. There is a different approach we follow. So what are the generators? They are a simple function which returns an iterable set of items one at a time in a special way. So as you observe, they won't return all the values of the array or list at a time. Based on the requirement, they will always return one at a time, but they will convert the values into iterable set of items. So it will convert the input values into iterators, but the only difference is it won't send all the value at a time. Based on the requirement, we will access them in a different way. So when an iteration is over, a set of items starts using the for statement. The generator is run. See, please understand this definition. So now what they're trying to say is your for loop is nothing but a generator. Your for loop is nothing but a generator. What does the for loop do? It will check for I equal to 0, I less than I plus plus. It will enter, go back to the starting point. So we know this in C language, right? So it will execute and go back to the starting point of the for loop. So are we able to see how it is going back to the for loop and read the next value? No, right? That is the internal implementation. So who is doing that part? The generator is doing part. So whenever the for loop is run for certain amount of time, right? Who is running the background code? Generator is running. So once the generator function reads the code, there is something called as yield statement. I will tell you. The generator yields its execution back to the for loop. So they use the term called as yield. Okay. So the generator is helping the for loop to go back to the starting point and returning a new value from the set. The generator function can generate as many possible values as it wants, yielding one, each one in its turn. correct? Suppose if you don't mention any terminating condition, just like infinite loop, it can generate as many as values as it's possible, right? That's why the name is generator. So to understand this, here if you see, we are not using any uh, no, terminology called as iter. We are not using iter, right? The same code we ran in the previous example where we used iter function, then we were calling the iterator. Now, what we are trying to do here is we are running this particular function, this particular code, and keeping those values in the memory inbuilt. This is the list values. So every value is multiplied by, not multiplied, cube root we are taking, cube root of list values, and that values, all the values are stored in Z, correct? But are we displaying all the values at a time? When I'm printing next of Z, it is only returning to me 1 because 1 cube is 1. When I'm rerunning that next of Z again, I'm getting the output as 8, correct? I'm getting the output as 8. So how many values I'm getting in this particular screen? Only 4 values. What about the remaining values? They are present in the generators. This particular generator is very clever. Until you ask for it, it won't return the values. That is the difference. Okay. Suppose if I write that function once again, I'll get the next available value in the generator. This is for what? For the 5 cube, right? So this is the importance of generator. Generator is working over the iterator and creating the new set of values. And that those new set of values are present in the memory and are accessible one by one only based on your requirement. Okay. So by dictionary function, you can see what all are there. Yeah, this is also possible. Now this is a time consuming process, right? Suppose I want to display the output like this means one by one. I have to write so many times this one. So to overcome this, there is a keyword called as yield, right? There is a yield statement. So you can observe in this code what I am trying to do. Okay. So there is a function called as lottery. So for I in range 6, this is also one more important topic I wanted to tell you. There is an inbuilt function called as random, which will help you to generate random set of numbers based on the range. So for every time that for loop is run, we are using yield keyword, and this yield is giving me any random number between 1 to 40. So random dot randint. Please explore Python random, very powerful function. The only reason I didn't add the programs for them is, can anyone tell me why I didn't add these random based programs in the model? But I have some examples. I will share that material. Test cases, grades. Okay. Test cases might be the valid answer. I don't know why grades. Basically, for example, say I will try to give a question. For example, generate a random number between 1 to 1000. I'll say I'll ask the program to do this. You people will write the program. But how many test cases I have to sit and write? How many test cases I have to write? So 1 to 1000 means obviously I have to write 1000 test cases because yeah, because every time the user runs that code, it can be any random number between 1 to 1000, correct? So that's the only reason I couldn't add those codes, but you need to explore that manually. So with this yield function, what is basically happening is it is yielding two different set of values in the for loop. One is between the range of 1 to 40, another is between the range of 1 to 15, right? Then when we are calling this random number for random number in lottery, when we are calling this lottery function, this particular for loop is able to help us to do this, right? All the values we are trying to display at a time. So it is yielding the next possible number. So this is same for loop that you are seeing the background, you can say implementation of the for loop. So whenever you are using the for loop, this yield is helping us to go to the next possible value. So a lot of examples you need to understand. You can observe this one, it will give you better clarity. See what it is yielding here. For I in range 10, if that particular I is divisible by 2, we are telling that yield I. Yield I means we are returning that value to the print function. So you are not seeing any return function, right? But how it is, how the compiler is able to print these values one by one, because they all are stored in the generator inbuilt and they are accessed based on I value every time. So as long as there are 10 values in the input, we are printing. Okay, so for I in simple, this function, we are calling this function and dividing that number by 2, and we are saying yield I. So yield I means it will store these values in the generator, and using the for loop, we are accessing them one by one. Okay. So this is also one of the important interview question. They will ask you, what is the difference between yield and return? The yield statement is responsible for controlling the flow of the generator function. It passes the function execution by saving all the states and yield it to the caller later. Later, it resumes execution whenever a successive function is called. Okay, we can use a multiple yield statement in the generator function. But what is the difference between return and yield? The return statement returns the value and terminates the whole function. Okay, see, the yield function is not terminating. Internally, it is storing. Are we written any break condition here? No break condition. If I mod 2, we are telling yield I, but we have not written any break condition. So internally, it is breaking the loop if there is no further possibility. So it is temporarily storing all the values in the memory as a generator. So can we use a multiple yield statements in a code? Yes, it is possible. Okay, so if you see this example, this is a function multiple yield where there are 3 strings, right? String 1, string 2, string 3. If you observe this code, you will see a lot of difference. We are not printing the strings directly, but instead we are accessing these strings based on the next class. So what the compiler is doing is, if there is a value in the string, it is yielding the string. So what do you mean by yielding the string? That means it will store this data somewhere in the memory. Whenever the user calls the next function, it will display the output. So it is not doing the job until you ask for it to do. That is the only difference. And it is not showing any error message also. So as long as I am having the successive strings in the memory, that many times I can call the next function. So we know how many strings are created. Okay. So it is a little bit confusing topic. So you need to work on little better programs, or in the coming days in the advanced Python session, we'll try to add more programs based on these concepts. So I'm just giving you the basic introduction of this exception handling, iterative tools, and difference between yield, why it is used. So when you work on the practical programs, you will get a better clarity actually. And it will make you practice these programs in the advanced Python session. So similarly, we have, I was talking about random function, right? How powerful it is. Okay, so how to use random function, I was talking. You need to import random numbers. Some people would have already done it. So you can either pass 2 parameters, 3 parameters, or you can mention the range. So it is generating random number between 0 to 9. Here we are random number between 10 to 100. And here range, we are giving the range. What is that range? Can anyone tell me what is this? 2, 20, 2. So this is the starting value. This is the stop value. And what is this third one? What is the third one is indicating? 2, 4, 6 step. Okay. Yeah. So you can mention step also while generating the random numbers. So it will generate a step of 2 only. So like 2, 4, 6, 8. So it will generate random numbers of even numbers basically. So if I run it every time, if you see the last value, 8, 14, 18, 12. So it is generating random numbers of even numbers. Then there is a function called as choice. Sometimes I don't want to display some random numbers. I want to restrict my choice within certain random numbers. So in this case, I have given the choice. Now you have a choice between 2, 3, 6, 7, 6, 7. Now return any one among this. It is like you will tell your friends, no, you have only three options, right? Choose any one. You don't have any other option like that. So here we have four options. In that, any one random number is chosen. So that is the inbuilt function called as random.choice. Then there is something called as duplicate. Obviously, when you are generating the random numbers, it will generate the duplicate values, right? So here we are mentioning the range 0 to 100, and this is, what is this 10? It is totally 10 numbers we want from the 0 to 100. How many random numbers you are generating? So there is a function called as sample. But what is the output if you observe? It is not generating any duplicate values. It is generating unique values. So no matter how many times you will run, you will get all unique values only. Then there is one powerful function called as sort. I think you already know the sort. So you can generate some random numbers between the range, and you can call that sort function. This kind of questions also they will ask. Generate some random 100 numbers, then sort them in certain way. So we have some library also, NumPy. You can explore this. We'll cover this in the advanced Python actually. So NumPy is also very powerful function which is used to do a lot of array applications. So here we are trying to generate a 4x4 matrix using NumPy, and the value set of values for that is between 10 to 50 random number values. It can start from 10 and maximum 50. So it is generating 4x4 values, matrix values. So we need to mention size here. So NumPy is the inbuilt module. So NumPy, pandas, scikit, all these are advanced Python techniques or machine learning techniques, which you are doing it later on. So this was one of the question which I saw, which was asked in some exam basically. So generate a random number of triangle values between the range 4 to 7. I have the condition is the random number values between, it should be between 4 to 7, right? So you need to use the random int function, random int 4 to 7, and each number is separated by new line, and this values can be anything basically. So this was the question asked. A lot of such interesting applications you need to understand. So can anyone tell me what we are doing here? Understand this code and tell me. What is happening in this code? See the output. No one. So what is happening in this code? Is it generating random numbers between 0 to 1? Only two possibilities I have given. Generate a random number between 0 to 1. So obviously two options. If the and totally generate 10 random numbers. If the number is 0, replace that with question mark. If the number is 1, replace that with star. That's why if you see every time the output is run from 0 to 9, if there is 0, print. Yeah. But this kind of question, obviously, I wanted to add in Moodle, but I can't add in Moodle. So how many test cases I need to write? Can anyone tell me? 10 into 2. Is it 10 into 2? Not 10 into 2. There are, I think, 10 into 10 actually. Each combination is different, right? So I have to almost add 100 test cases. So that much manpower we don't have. But if you see in the hacker rank and all, some questions will have around 100 test cases, 200 test cases. So people will be constantly working on this test cases background. because they will be only doing that work actually. For every question, there will be minimum 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 test cases. So if the manpower is there, we can do those things. But here it is impossible for one person to add these many test cases, and we'll be wasting a lot of time also. So that's why I didn't add these kind of questions. But you can do power 10. Yeah, Ankit is right. This is also one of the interesting test case. Here we are replacing that with A and B. There is one important function, please understand. I'll just give the clue. To overcome this randomness, there is something called as seed. This was told by one of your senior to me actually. So you can add test case based on seed function, he told me. Okay. So this seed function, again, with this also some disadvantages are there, but I'm just telling you the importance of the seed function. So you can see this code, import random. I have some range of values I'm generating, but if you see before generating the values, I'll delete this last line. Before generating that values, I am writing something called as random.seed. Then I'm trying to print a random number between 1 to 10. Okay. But if you see, every time I'm running this code, what is the output I'm getting? Only 3. Suppose I'll change the value here. I'll change it to something else. What is the output I'm getting? Am I getting the separate random numbers every time or the same random number? Same random number. Now I'll comment line this. So now the seed function I have not used. To observe the code, every time I'm running the code, I'm getting the different range of values. This problem we can avoid using seed function. Can anyone tell me what seed is doing? We'll wind up after this. What is the importance of seed function? Can anyone tell me? What it is trying to do basically? To overcome randomness. Is it overcoming the randomness? Yes, it is locking a certain number. So there is a randomness. Yes, also all of you are right actually. It is selecting a random number and fixing it. So I'm generating a random number only once actually. I'm not generating it multiple times. So same thing here. No matter how many times I'm calling the random function, every time again I'm getting the output as 138. But this also has disadvantage. If I add test case based on this, everyone knows that if I mention random.seed 10 you use and display an output like this, so people can directly print that 6 as the output. So there is no point in writing the test case also. But this solves a lot of problem actually. So if you see this code, I'm generating 10 random numbers between 0 to 100. Okay. 10 random numbers from 0 to 100. Then I'm finding the smallest number in that. This is also one of the important question. So 10 random numbers from 0 to 100. And in that random numbers, I want to display which is the smallest number between 1 to 100. Okay. In this case, if I don't use random.seed, you can see every time it is generating different set of random numbers and different smallest number is getting printed. Sometimes 3, 5, 1, 34, 16. So let us fix this with some other value. Now I made, see this seed value can be anything. There is no fixed rule here. Based on the seed value, we'll get certain output. And as a test case writer, I can make that particular as the output. If I execute this multiple times, please observe, are the values getting changed here? Please observe this one. Are the values getting changed? No, right? The values are not getting changed. So what you are understanding here is the seed function is helping us to generate only one set of random numbers, correct? only one set of random numbers between the given condition. And in that random numbers, I'm finding the smallest number. So this is helping us to solve the problem of repeated random number generation, or you can say it will help us to generate only one iteration of the random numbers. That's the advantage of seed function. So a lot of applications they use based on this seed function. So you need to explore more problems. This one problem I have given for your understanding. So this particular code I can give it as a test case in the Moodle. But the problem is, what is the problem in this? Can anyone tell me? Again, in this case, since I've used seed value, the input and output is fixed. Can I write multiple test cases for this question? Impossible, right? No, because if I mention seed, if I give in the question that students, you have to use seed function with 3 as the value, I will say. So this is the fixed input, fixed output you will get between 1 to 100 if you mention seed value. And obviously in that you will get the smallest number as 8 only. So I have to write just one test case, and that test case I have to enable it. So obviously you have to see at least one test case to write the code. So those who wants to implement like this, they will implement it using the random numbers, or else they will write if the input is this, print the output as 8. Correct? You can also print the test case without. What do you mean, Satvika? I didn't understand. Yeah, you can also print the test. That's what I'm trying to say. We can print the test case without any logic. So that is the only reason I didn't add these questions. Otherwise, I have so many examples to give in the random numbers. Lot of variety of questions you can practice. So your job is to explore more problems and learn different ways of using the random numbers. One such application, last, I'll take 2 minutes. This is one of the important application of the random numbers. So what we are doing here is we're generating a random password. You can see how the Google is generating the different OTP, it is generating a different password, right? Whenever you want to create new password, it is suggesting the password. How the Google is suggesting the password with this kind of applications. So here what we are doing is we are using random password function, right? And we are using inbuilt string. You know, the string has ASCII characters, digits, and punctuations, which we are fetching internal values. ASCII characters from A to Z, string digits from 0 to 9, and punctuations. If you see your keyboard, starting from 1 to backspace, you will see all the punctuations and special characters. So that will be, suppose it can be dollar or it can be and symbol or anything. So it will fetch randomly those values. Then we are sampling. In the previous example, I told you, now what is sample here? I explained somewhere here. What is sample? Random dot sample 0 to 100, 10. So what it is doing? Without duplicates, right? So it is generating a random set of values from these 3 inbuilt values. Maximum is 3. So without duplicates, right? Suppose A here, B 1. This or dollar. Not be here 0 or anything, but it should not be having any duplicates. Okay. Maximum sample size is 3 from this source. Then again in that what we are trailing string dot ASCII uppercase 1. So in that sample you need to have at least one uppercase. So we are concatenating. We are generating one more set of sample from this given random source, right? Random dot sample. From this particular ASCII uppercase, we are getting 1. Then again, we are concatenating digit. We are concatenating digit and we are concatenating punctuation. So overall length is how much? Can you see? 3 plus 1, 4, 5, and 6. That's why every time I run this code, I'm getting different password. Total length is 6. Sometimes I'm getting like this. If you see next time when I'm writing, executing, every time it is generating a different password, right? So this is a done using random numbers. So not numbers, we are combining punctuations, letters, and digits, all the things. And we are using all these functions based on our requirement. In this case, why we have used choice? Because the choice is between 0 to 9 only, right? Any number from 0 to 9, and any punctuation from this to this in your keyboard. So every time it is generating those kind of passwords based on the choice. And what is sample? Sample is giving me without duplicated uppercase letter. So you see there is no other uppercase in this example, only one uppercase letter. And random dot sample, random source. So source is how much? 3 sources are there. Any values from these 3 sources. And they will develop some lucky draw kind of examples also from this, right? So here we are generating lucky draw basically from this range. Then sampling 2 values from that. It is generating 10 values. And then from those 10 values, we are sampling 2 values. So from this 10, I'm getting for range, basically 1 to 10 number, range is 5. From the range of 5, again, I want to return 2 values as a lucky draw winners. So a lot of applications are there using random numbers. You can explore and learn. Okay. So further topics, if there is any requirement and based on the student's interest, we will continue. So I'll send one form. So until when your internals are there, based on the requirement, we will continue the class. But maybe we won't get a slot after this today's class. I will let you know. I will share one Google form or a link to fill the details. If anyone wants to further continue the classes, at least 1 or 2 classes, you can fill the form and let me know. Even if there are 100 students, we will continue. Not an issue. Okay. So we'll see in the next session. I will upload this program so you can explore and learn it based on your free time. Okay. So see you in the coming class.